We're going to get started. Um, a warm Inclusion Ireland welcome to each and every one of you who've joined us this morning for this exciting launch event. A little bit about us for people who don't know Inclusion Ireland well. We're the national advocacy organisation for people with an intellectual disability and their family members. And we were established in 1961, and our sole focus is on the human rights of people with intellectual disabilities. And we take our guide from the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And we're absolutely delighted to welcome you all here today. We were blown away by the response to this webinar. Over 650 people registered, which just goes to show the phenomenal interest there is in understanding the Assisted Decision Making Act and how we can all better support one another to understand it and to be ambassadors for the principles set out within it. The materials that you're going to hear a little bit more about today were co-created and designed with 30 self-advocates from the Midlands Conversation Group, as well as with invaluable feedback from the decision support champions, Florin, Paul, Margaret, Lydia and Fionn. The principles set out within it will be discussed today, and it's important to mention that they apply to every single human being, no matter what level of support, what diagnosis, or any other labelling that happens. Every single person must be presumed to have the capacity to make decisions, and it is absolutely imperative that we do not lose sight of this. We often hear at Inclusion Ireland, yes, but this person is non-speaking or doesn't use speech to communicate. And we absolutely recognise that this is an additional barrier that a person might face, but one that can be overcome if we all recognise that every single person can communicate their will and preference in their own way and time if they're surrounded by people who are willing to listen, not for words, but in all the other ways a person tells us what and who is important in their lives. None of us exist in isolation. We all need support. And it's really important that we don't misinterpret the Act or indeed the HSE consent policy by shutting out loved ones, family, friends, who may all, if it's the person's will and preference, play a role as supporter. And I'll ask us all to think about how we make decisions, good ones, bad ones, terrible ones, and what we learned by doing that, and who we had around us as sounding boards, support, and listeners. So let's not pathologise decision making. It's a wonderful part of being human and where we learn the good and the hard lessons in life. So on this note, I would love to welcome all of our panellists today and to offer them Inclusion Ireland sincere thank yous for being with us today. So we have with us this morning the Director of the Decision Support Service, Anya Flynn. We have Patria Malone, who is an advocacy project worker with Inclusion Ireland and has supported the development of these materials over a long period of time, working in partnership with the self-advocates. Stuart Mason, Anthony Shore and David King from the Midlands Conversation Group, who are going to present with Patria today. We have Lydia Fisher, Decision Support Champion and long-time friend of Inclusion Ireland and self-advocate. And finally, we'll have Caoimhe Gleeson from the National Office for Human Rights within the HSE, who's come to share with us her thoughts on the launch of the materials today. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Anya Flynn this morning. Just to note, we do have Irish Sign Language interpretation this morning as well for anybody who needs it and can access it. Thank you, Anya, and a warm welcome.
Thank you, Derval, and thank you to Inclusion Ireland for having me along to your launch. It's a real honour. I often quote Inclusion Ireland, who, when welcoming the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act at the end of 2015, wrote that it represented a seismic cultural shift towards a rights-based approach of choice, control, and consent. And it's so important, essential really, that people with an intellectual disability have access to information on the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act and our work in the Decision Support Service, knowing what we do, with all of the accommodations that they need And that includes obviously having information in an accessible format that works for them. This is an act which has plenty to say about information and communication. The lack of accessible information for people with an intellectual disability risks denying people access to their rights. Article 12 of UNCRPD, which Derval has mentioned, guarantees the legal capacity of disabled people on an equal basis with others. And if legal capacity means being entitled to hold and to exercise rights, then we all need to know what those rights are. And it's so important, of course, that information is provided in a format that people can use if those rights are to be made meaningful. Of critical importance to note about these materials is that they have been co-designed, as Derval has said, with people who have an intellectual disability, and we're really looking forward to hearing more from some of those individuals who have played that key role during this morning's webinar. It's also really heartening, as Derval has mentioned, to hear of the high numbers of people who have registered for this event. It shows the level of interest, the level of commitment to supporting people to understanding their rights and what this important piece of reforming legislation can mean for them. And what is also great is that Inclusion Ireland is making these materials and all of the supporting resources available on their website from today. This open access approach is really welcome, and we hope that these materials reach many interested colleagues right across Ireland who want to work with disabled people to understand the Act and the new statutory framework of support. In relation to our own functions in the Decision Support Service, and some of you will be quite familiar with us, but just to perhaps summarise what we do, our role in the Decision Support Service, and we're established under the 2015 Act, I usually summarise it in this way. We have a role to provide information and guidance, to register the new decision support arrangements, and to supervise how they are carried out, because safeguards, which are also part of UNCRPD, safeguarding is really important. Just to let you know that we have now over 19,000 opened MyDSS accounts, and we now have over 2,000 registered decision support arrangements. So expanding all the time since we fully opened the doors in April of last year. So I've mentioned that one of our roles is to promote awareness and confidence. And on that awareness raising side, you may be familiar with our public information campaign, which we ran last year and early into this year with the tagline, "My Decisions, My Rights," which featured our heroic DSS champions, some of whom have also contributed to the development of these training materials. So I want to pay tribute to them and how they so generously shared our stories with us. Paul, Margaret, Fionn, Lydia and Florin, I see, are mentioned directly in the training materials, and it's really great to see them continue in that work. So thinking again about my job as director to promote awareness and confidence, you definitely can't do it alone, and partnership is really important, including the partnership which we have been delighted to establish and sustain with Inclusion Ireland. So Inclusion Ireland coordinates our stakeholder forum, and the feedback that we have received from the stakeholder forum has helped the DSS to become more responsive to people with intellectual disabilities. And they've done that in a number of ways, helping us with the creation of accessible information, understanding the potential of the digital divide, understanding that digital does suit some people perfectly, and that, you know, a manual or paper-based approach isn't necessarily the accessible one. Being persuaders to help us to get a free phone number, which we've had now for a couple of months. So thank you to our stakeholder forum for that. Helping us with the review of our systems. I think Inclusion also helped us with the development of the easy read version of the Act, which you'll find on our website. And also this year, our stakeholder forum helped us with the development of our own accessibility policy. So we certainly in the Decision Support Service don't claim to do everything perfectly. I think we are very much a work in progress, and perhaps always will be. There'll always be room for improvement, but it's so useful, essential to have that input of experts by experience. So if I move now to cutting the ribbon for you, delighted to do so. I'm really pleased to officially launch these materials today. I feel sure that they will be put to good use across the country in supporting disabled people to access information and knowledge about their rights, and helping them to approach the Act and the new framework with confidence. Derval has mentioned the guiding principles. And we must always bring our thinking back to those first principles, the presumption of capacity, the need to support people as far as possible in the exercise of their autonomy. And as I've taken to saying, not rushing necessarily to deploy the formal supports under the Act. By not doing so, you are also giving effect to the Act. And of course, fundamentally helping people to ensure that their will and their preferences are respected. I'm delighted to see these principles clearly outlined in the training. So I formally wish Inclusion Ireland the very best in promoting these materials and ensuring that they reach as many people as possible. And thank you so much again for having me along to launch today. Thank you.
Thank you, Anya, and thank you for your support and kind words. And ending on that note is always welcome. We need to continuously bring back to the guiding principles of the Act. And by doing so, you are giving effect to the Act. And that's so important for people across the country listening today to bear that in mind, that is absolutely where we need to be. As we deepen our understanding of the Act and support people to access their rights. Thank you, Anya, for being with us. I'm now going to call on Patria Malone, our colleague at Inclusion Ireland, who has, I suppose, developed these materials over time in a considered and thoughtful way and a mindful way with numerous self-advocates with the Midlands Conversation Group and the Decision Support Champions. And Patria is going to bring us through a practical session now to show us, I suppose, the materials themselves and where they're housed on our website and how you can access them as a supporter. So I'll hand over to Patria now. Thank you, Patria.
Thank you, Derval. Delighted to be here this morning, and even more delighted that we have numerous people across the country who have shown such interest in this material. To give you a small bit of background about our conversation group, we have met since 2018, and that is the same year that the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability was ratified. And this group has continuously during that time shown great interest in the various articles of the convention. And so it was natural for us to delve more deeply into the information of the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act. The slides will appear here in a moment, and I want to go through them with you just to share briefly the materials that have been created over time on the material. So this training resource, as Derval said, was created with advocates within the conversation group. And one of the main interests that we had at Inclusion Ireland was making the information as accessible as possible and taking the time that it needed to truly embed with individuals decision making. And what does our decision making look like? The training material that you'll find, the 50 or so pages of a manual, has contents, as you can see here, that include an introduction to the Assisted Decision-Making Capacity Act of 2015, and then 3 decision-making training sessions. Now, they're very much at the beginning of the thought process around decision-making, looking at what those natural supports are around decision-making. Who are the people in our lives that assist us with decision-making? Where do we find ourselves in a decision-making role? And then, as Anya said there, what are the formal supports should we need them going forward? And then looking at some evaluation, intended results, and then the resources, which I will display here on this slide presentation this morning. So to begin with, the first sessions of the of the slides of the PowerPoint presentations. Number one is looking at the introduction of language around decision making. What is a decision? What is a choice? Weighing in choice and decision, and then introducing steps of decision making within the decision making process with the paddles and template chart of the United Nations Convention on the Right with Persons with Disability. So in setting up each of the training sessions, what we did was we formed a rectangular table, and on that table we put out a chart of the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So we were always reflecting back on our decisions in line with the UN Convention. Where are our rights, and how do we give voice to our rights? So that was before us, and each person had before them as well the paddles, and we'll be showing those to you here as we go along, that looked at the steps of decision making, and then a template as well on the steps of decision making. So it was highly visual, so that each person could be brought along as he or she was able during the process of training. In the second hour-long session, we look more closely at what is the Assisted Decision Making Act. Why is it important? Why is it important that we know about it and know the language of the Decision Making Act? What is the Decision Support Service? And exploring, as has been mentioned here today, the main beliefs or the guiding principles. So that points out, you know, the language, looking at the language of the Decision Making Act. Many of our individuals found the guiding principles language. What does that mean? So we broke it down into what are the main beliefs? We know what a belief is. And so just slowly to break that down. Interspersed or involved in this as well is the decision-making cards, and I'll show you those as we go along. And each of the decision-making cards, we have a decision that we might make in our life. And so we did role play. So it was very engaging in these sessions with role play around what's a real life decision that I have made or I may need to make, and then walking ourselves through the steps of that decision. And the third session, the third hour-long session, is to review the Assisted Decision Making Act, Decision Support Service, decisions covered and decisions not covered within the law, and the role of supporters and the levels of support when or if needed by an individual. Next, we have the materials themselves. So the materials themselves include decision-making steps, okay? And included in there is what is called within the law the functional test. We didn't overemphasize the language of functional tests. What we emphasized was that decision-making steps. There are decisions, and when we break down any decision, we have to look at information, thinking about, remembering, communicate. And this is part of the sessions that I enjoyed greatly because as we looked at a decision, we would break it down and we would talk about, okay, what's the information we need? And, you know, showing the paddle, what do we need to remember here? And how do we put it into words? How do we communicate it? Below that is the decision-making template. And you can see in the center, it's revolving, okay? It's revolving in terms of decision-making. We may not always start with the information. We may be thinking about something and then we have to go find information. That was a continuous process. And then also before each individual during the training, we had the template, which you see on the right there, which is the articles of the convention, and to ask ourselves, okay, this is important that we link our decision-making, we know our rights. This is a right-based approach to our decision-making, giving us more voice in our own decision-making. Next, we looked at, as I mentioned, some of the decisions that we might encounter. So some of those decisions are around personal welfare, others are around property and money. And you can see there's some real practical things that people may encounter in their lives. Under personal welfare, maybe where to live. Under property and money, it may be where to bank or paying bills. So we brought this to real life scenarios, trying to connect with what was really happening in our lives. And then also looking forward into our lives with our own hopes and dreams, really based on our own will and preference around decision making. Included in our training, we have interspersed the decision support champions. And these are individuals, as has been mentioned here, who have worked with the decision support service around promoting the rights to make a decision. And we intersperse in our training some of the videos that were done through the decision support service that give, again, more background and support to the right of making decisions. As you can see there, my decisions, my rights. Also included in the supplementary material, this is more so when a person has a decision, a big decision to make, and looking at what are the parts of that decision. So in the decision-making worksheet, this is a resource tool for an individual to work through a decision, oftentimes with a person, a natural support person who may support them. So to look at maybe one decision, what's the information needed? What do I need to remember? What do I need to think about? And what do I need to communicate? Like any worksheet, it's a tabletop exercise in really thinking through parts of a decision. Like that, we have the underpinning of the 9 main beliefs or the guiding principles. And I think the one that people in the group really prized is that number 1 is that I can make decisions about my own life. We kept coming back to that presumption of capacity, and that was the place to begin with all of our decision making. Also included in the material, you'll see on our website a page in which you can reach out online for further information. There's information on an easy-to-read guide through the Decision Support Service and other material that may supplement through the HSE National Office for Human Rights and Equality Policy, just a further understanding of the Decision-Making Act. This shows on our website as well, other access on our website to decision-making to make it easy. And that material, as was mentioned, has now gone live onto our website. And we hope that you may find it a good resource. So now I'm interested to go on to speak to some of our advocates. I'm sitting here in Roscrea and in Tipperary with some of our advocates who have given graciously of their time and energy and talent to be with us here this morning. Where I would like to begin is with, well, I'll introduce first, we have 3 individuals in the room here today. We have David, Anthony, and Stuart. And after I've spoken to them, I will then move on to speaking with our decision support champion, with Lydia. So Stuart, each of you participated in the review of the assisted decision-making material. And it was important for Inclusion Ireland that you gave your time, energy, and talent. What did you find, Stuart, that was most useful in the training? Okay, the paddles. And why the paddles, Stuart?
the different ways that you can get help to make a decision
Okay.
and what? Oh.
Can we hear Stuart okay? No, okay. We'll try that again here. Okay, the paddles. Now, go ahead.
Well, the paddles were useful to help get the different points across on how to ask for the right supports and help make a decision. And getting your point across and asking for the help that you need and not to be too afraid to do it.
Excellent.
And it can be helpful for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we used the paddles when we were looking at our decisions. Do you think there was one part of the decision that was really stuck out for you? Information, remember, think about,
Yeah.
and communicate.
That's right.
Did one of them stand out for you?
Well, communication, because you have to like be able to talk and get the words out and get the help you need. Yeah.
Excellent.
And not be sorry about
Excellent. Thank you.
you. Thank you.
So thank you for having patience with our technology all in one room. I think what I will do is I will move my machine around so that we don't have the echo. We can hear one another much better. So Anthony, we learned that there are steps to decision making, and we learned that decision making is a process and it takes time. What steps are important to you and why?
What did I say again? Was important.
Communication and thinking about.
Yeah, thinking about.
Why was that important, Anthony?
Because thinking out is you're thinking of things to say to other people when they can't speak up for themselves or communicate. Yeah.
And whose voice then?
My voice you're hearing.
Yeah.
You're hearing my voice.
Hearing your voice, and why is that important when it comes to decision making? Why is that important?
And to get it out here.
Mhm.
Get out here, let everyone know. Let everyone know.
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of places to go on if they need help, right?
And how did that make you feel when your voice is used?
I feel happy doing it.
Mhm.
Because all the people won't know what's there. They won't know what's out there. Different services. They won't know what's there. Right?
Okay, and David, we acted out some real life situations about banking and housing and healthcare and many more. And we went through steps of decision making in each of these situations. What was most important to you in each of these decision making situations?
I suppose it was the right to do it. It takes a good bit to come up with the right words and stuff for some of us to make the decisions. And a lot of us are they're made for us. So like it's very important that we come up with the right way to actually communicate how we decide these things. And it might take a while to get them together with words, but I'm sure there are some people out there that might be able to interpret us properly.
And how does that feel, David, when you're using your own voice around decision making?
It's empowering enough, but again, it depends on the decision. Some decisions are easy, like going to the shop, the yes or no stuff. They're all like simple enough stuff to come up with. It's those hard ones that are like life changing that sometimes you just need a little bit of a push to get going with. It can sometimes take a bit to get going in those decisions, mainly just because sometimes people take advantage of it and push you in ways you don't want to go. So you have to be really kind of on your game on whether or not it's your decision or not.
Excellent. Thank you, David. And Stuart, we spent time learning about support in making decisions. We spoke of our natural supports, our family members and friends and other supporters in our lives. These natural supports, obviously, they don't have to change because of this law, but there is a service that can help us with support if we need it in our future. And it's called the Decision Support Service. And we learned about the levels of support and the work of the Decision Support Service. Did the training, did it help you to think about support and what it may mean for you?
Well, yeah, again, knowing about the right support services to go to, it's a comfort to everyone, because sometimes you need that support, and to know the right people to come to when you need it is kind of a good thing. You know, it's important to have the people to go to when you need to make decisions in your life.
And knowing that the Decision Support Service is there, maybe not needing it now,
Yeah.
but learning that that support is there gave you a little assurance, gave you a little confidence in knowing it exists. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Now, the new law shows how starting place for a person when it comes to making decisions is to presume to think about a person as having ability to make a decision. Having learned about the Assisted Decision-Making Act, what would you like, this is a general question for Anthony, David, or Stuart, what would you like others to know about the Assisted Decision-Making Law and the Decision Support Service? What would you like others to know?
To get out here. Stuart's not gonna talk, or do you?
You'd like to know?
And I can, to get out there and more services for people. And it's more houses for people with disabilities and all that. I like to get more out there.
More information out there.
More information out there.
Thank you, thank you. Stuart or David? What would you like others to know?
No.
Mhm. Yeah. What would you like others to know, Stuart?
Wait a minute, I'm on mute now. No.
One thing I found in training, Stuart, is that you were asking a lot of questions. And to give you time to ask those questions was important. So to spend the time thinking about it. Would that be good for others to know? And David?
It's not about the type of question you get, it's gonna be about the answer. For me, a lot of the time it's like a question something, but it's usually dismissed out of hand or stuff like that. So you really have to push the question that you want answered. If you don't push it, you're not gonna get an answer. Especially in this day and age.
Great. It's great insight. Well, I want to thank the three of you very much for your contributions this morning. They're invaluable. And I look forward. We will continue to do this work. We have our set of paddles, and I think we'll be using them at each of our sessions. We've come to know quite well the importance of decision making. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on now. Thank you, Stuart. I'm going to move on to our decision support champion, to Lydia. Are you there with us, Lydia?
I am. How are you?
Hello, Lydia. I'm well. Good morning. So, Lydia, you contributed in reviewing this material with me, and we found that it was important to look it over, to spend time with it. And what does it mean to you, first of all, to be a decision support champion?
For me, it was an honor and a half, because I am a person with an intellectual disability. So for me, being on TV, it gave people the courage. You can do anything if you put your mind to, if you put your soul to. It just gives me amazing feeling that, oh my God, they pick me. I can do anything. I do not have to be scared. I just have to remember to ask for help when I need the help. Do not be afraid. And there are loads of people here who is willing to help me. Sometimes their advice may not be what I want to hear, but maybe what I need in the future.
Very good. Good insight, Lydia. Thank you. And I know you've spoken about this a lot to people, which is something we're very grateful for, because you've really given a good voice to the decision-making process. What is important to you about this process? What is important to you about making a decision?
It's important to me because I can know that I'm doing something good for now and for the future. For the future is the generation, the people with intellectual disability, people who can't speak, but they can use both, or they can use all the action to say what they want. People do not have to make every decision for us. Sometimes our decision is our decision. It may be wrong or it may be right, but make sure to be with us, not to be against us when we are making decisions.
I applaud to that, Lydia. That's fantastic. You know, that right to make a decision. What do you think, Lydia, when you look at the material and know that this training material exists for people to learn about decision making, to speak about decision making? What do you think might be most useful in these materials for a person with intellectual disability?
I think it's more useful is for them people to read it, for them people to know that, oh, there is help out there. I can get more help than I used to, than a couple years ago. I think it's more meaningful to us people with disability now than a couple years ago. Because a couple years ago, people just make decision for us just because what they think is suitable for us, not what they want us to do, but what they think is safe for us. But now the table have turned around. It's out with we are making decisions and no one else, because as everyone knows, we are all different in our own unique way. So it's the power, the energy to give us a feeling, oh, I can make that decision and just when I was asked a year and a half ago to be on the television, I was like the interview or the dawn, I would say, they asked me, my kid would say, hello. I just couldn't believe it. Because I always imagine me going far. I didn't really think I would get where I am today. So in everybody left, there is decisions that we all can make, and there is people there who can support us to make it in a good way, not make it for us, make it with us, or let us to make it for ourselves. That's what I am more proud of now that we do.
Well, I think there's nothing more that needs to be heard from me after that, Lydia. That was terrific, right on the spot, with all of you, with Lydia, David, Anthony, and Stuart. Just learning about decision making and the importance of decision making, and letting people know and knowing for ourselves that we have the right to make those decisions. So I want to thank you. Thank you very much, and wish you most well.
Thank you, Patria, and thank you sincerely to Stuart, Anthony, David, and Lydia. And as Patria said, what can be more important than that? Listening to, I suppose, the power of decision making, the importance of decision making, and I suppose really hearing from people about what accommodations people need and support people need to understand our rights and to really make decision making real, and something that is possible for each and every human being. So I'm really, really grateful to you all for sharing your insight and your wisdom with us today, and for all of the support you've given us in the development of these materials, working alongside Patria, because that's what's important about all of this, is that it was co-created and co-designed. So really delighted to have you with us today. Our final speaker this morning, and a warm welcome to you, is Caoimhe Gleeson, who's the General Manager in the National Office for Human Rights and Equality Policy with the HSE. And Caoimhe and her team have been heavily involved in rolling out information and in making sure that people across the HSE and HSE funded services have a full understanding of the Assisted Decision Making Act and what it means for the people that we are supporting. So a warm welcome to you, Caoimhe, to share your insights this morning with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Derval and everyone in Inclusion Ireland for asking me to celebrate the launch of the training materials on the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act with you today. As Derval says, my name is Caoimhe Gleeson and I work in the HSE National Office for Human Rights and Equality Policy. The role of our office is to support and promote the spirit and the letter of the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act among staff. So we're really delighted to see this resource been launched today. For the rest of my talk, I'm going to call the Assisted Decision Making Capacity Act the 2015 Act because it's far too long. So as both Anya and Derval have said, there's a great need, and all of you have said, there's a great need to have information on the 2015 Act for people with intellectual disabilities. It is so important that this resource has now been developed to support staff, to support people like yourselves, to know about your human rights under this Act. Our office have developed lots of e-learning programs, training materials, presentations. We even wrote a book. We host lots of webinars, seminars, workshops and conferences. We're always trying to come up with ways of reaching the largest group possible on the importance of the 2015 Act. Last week, we had a conference in Cork with the Decision Support Service. Anya was there, and with the University College Cork. The purpose of the conference was to reflect on what has happened since the commencement of the Act and to ask ourselves, why does this act matter anyway? The big message from our conference was that people need support to live their best lives. And in order to live their best lives, they need options explained in accessible ways to help them make decisions. This is exactly what this training tool does. It breaks down big decisions into smaller decisions and into the choices and options that people need to understand first before making a decision. We know through our work that we still have a lot to do to support people with intellectual disabilities to live their best lives. We know that people see the disability first and not the person. We know that people think about what the person can't do rather than what they can do. We know that this becomes a barrier in accessing finances, setting up a bank account, trying to get a job, trying to save money, trying to buy a mobile phone, trying to get a passport, and lots of day-to-day things that many of us just take for granted. We must support people to change their thinking, to presume capacity, support decision-making, and enhance whatever ability the person has to make their own decisions. We must do this over and over and over until it becomes ingrained in our DNA. The provision of accessible information is life-changing. When options are explained in pictures, sounds, or words, it greatly enhances informed decision-making. Earlier this year, we worked with colleagues and friends in St. Michael's House, on our easy-to-read guide to the HSE National Consent Policy. We believe that informed consent is a right and people should have access to these rights in an accessible format. Supported decision-making is a right. Having information in a format that is accessible every time is a right. This training tool that is being launched today goes a long way in helping people understand all of these rights, which is so important for equality. Another big message that we took away from our conference last week is that equality and human rights is everyone's business. If we are to ensure that everyone gets access to the knowledge about their rights, we must have meaningful collaborations with self-advocates such as all of yourselves in Inclusion Ireland and around the country, with families, supporters and organisations like the Decision Support Service, the Legal Aid Board, the HSE, the Office of the Wards of Court and lots of other organisations. The 2015 Act recognised that we exist in relationship with others. And it is essential, while it is essential that we take the time to establish what a person wants and what is their will and preference, it is equally as important that we find out from them who matters to them and who should be included in decisions that matter to them. Families and those closest to the person do matter in the 2015 Act. We will support Inclusion Ireland to get this training resource out to as many people who work and support people with disabilities across all of our services. We will highlight the resource in our newsletter, which will be coming out just after Christmas. We will highlight it to all of the services we know, to our ADM mentorship programme and to all of our ADM leads. So finally, really well done to Stuart, Anthony, David, to Lydia, Patria, and everyone from the Midlands conversation groups, to all of the DSS champions who co-developed this excellent resource. And thank you so much for the opportunity to talk today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caoimhe, and thanks for being with us today. So we're coming to the end of our session now, and I would just like to thank again all of our panelists for being with us to launch these materials today. As Anya has mentioned, these are available as an open resource now on our website, and Patria has highlighted in her presentation where you can find them. But we look forward to lots of engagement with people who have joined us online today. We'll be following up with an email with a link to the resources. And you can always get in touch with us at Inclusion Ireland if you have any follow-up questions. If you want to know how to support our work, it's all about becoming a member of Inclusion Ireland. So we accept membership from people with an intellectual disability, from family members, and from allies and supporters like all of you who have joined us today. This is not a money-making venture for Inclusion Ireland. The costs are between €1 and €10 to become a member. It's really about amplifying the voice of people with an intellectual disability and working together as we try to achieve people's human rights under UN CRPD. So we'd really welcome your membership and joining us on that movement for change. Thank you all for being with us. I'll now draw this webinar to a close, and we look forward to working together to making sure these materials land where they need to land and support people with intellectual disabilities across the country to understand their rights. Thank you.